and good follow-up. Anything else? We're cruising right along here. Awesome. All right, so Adsb and TIS and UAT. I bet most of you have probably heard of what Adsb is, but we're doing something a little different. So this map, I'm just going to kind of let maybe go. Oh, it is going. Okay, so I think the resolution's probably bad, but basically what we're looking at, I think I did this about a week and a half ago. So in one of the major flight feeder websites, so there's all these ground stations like me and other people feed into different websites to track aircraft. And so some of them offer the ability to look at from different altitudes. And so as you start to see on this map, it started to get busier and busier. So what I did was I started at 65,000 foot, which is really where the maximum things are. There were some balloons in the center of the country. I thought Project Loon was actually dead. That was one of Google's things. But apparently there's like 4 or 5 of them up there right now. So there were those that were being tracked, then aircraft, and then I went down from 65 all the way down. So we can see like there's a lot of traffic here. And now I'm coming back down the other way. So instead of going from maximum altitude, now we're going down to smallest. And so what we're going to start to see is the number of aircraft starts to diminish. So we're talking about like when we get under 2,000 feet, little like Cessna 172s and whatnot. But this was, I think, at like 11 o'clock one night that I had nothing better to do, apparently. And this is what was flying around at like 11 o'clock Eastern time. So to give an idea, there's a lot of air traffic, and like 11 o'clock at night is not the peak. So I think we all know that from the previous presentation. There's all sorts of things flying around. But Adsb is one of the major things that I think we could all track, and there's lots of things out there, but I'll get into a little bit of the details because there's been some changes and some, I don't want to call them advancements, but some additional complexity to the national air traffic of how things get tracked. So Adsb is what we know. The frequency for Adsb is 1.09 gigahertz or 1090 megahertz, whatever you want to call it. It's roughly like a 2 megahertz wide signal. So if anyone has one of the RTL SDR dongles, you can use those to receive this. It has a 3.2 megahertz bandwidth. This is like a 2 megahertz wide signal. So you could receive Adsb signals. That's where most of the air traffic is. And so for an Adsb signal to work, it transmits down, and various ground stations could receive that for national level stuff. But again, it's signals that are unencrypted in the clear. You know, your ground station, if you had an SDR and plugged it into your phone, if you were outside in the parking lot, you could be receiving aircraft, and now you're a ground station. And then it's up to you if you want to look at that locally or send it out over the internet to share with others. But there's a lot of other things that are going on right now. So there's something else called UAT, which is at 978 megahertz. Most all large commercial aircraft use Adsb at 1090. Smaller aircraft use UAT. UAT is only in use in the United States. There's no other countries that use that. So that probably is like another question that some of you might be thinking about. So that's like a US only thing. And I'll share that on the next slide. So there's those two. Then there's also something called TISB. So TISB is actually different, even though that this is meant to be a presentation that talks about signals coming from the sky, flying. There's something called TISB. So the ground stations transmit things like weather data on the ground up to aircraft. And if you live relatively close enough to an airport, you can receive these. And so if anyone has wondered if they have received Adsb before, and they look at what's being received, sometimes there's like these weird anomalies that, you know, just keep transmitting and transmitting, but you can't tell where they are because they're not sharing their latitude and longitude. Chances are it's one of the FAA sites. Where I live in Poughkeepsie, nearby there's 3 of these sites, and it always looks weird when I show people like my aircraft tracker, like, why have you received 200,000 packets from this one where most aircraft are like 1,000 once before they fly out of range or whatever. So TISB is something interesting. Again, if you live near an airport, that could be something extra fun to explore. So yeah, ground things need flying signals, flying things need ground signals, flying things need flying signals, and ground signals need flying signals? Question mark? Yeah, I think I kind of just needed 4 things there. So Yeah, that's the deal here. And then just to kind of look at that a little bit more closely. So the majority of aircraft use ADS-B at 1090. So that means basically what they're doing is they are receiving their location via GPS on the aircraft. Then they're rebroadcasting many, many flight parameters, temperature, airspeed. They can send out like emergency alerts. They can send all this other stuff added to that signal, as well as their location and speed and all that other stuff. So they're sending that out. And so that's when you receive something, it's coming directly from an airplane. That's what's ingested to the air traffic control system in the United States, and then they do various different things with it. That's actually quite a bit different than this new kid on the block called UAT. So UAT kind of does the same thing, you know, again, for like little private aircraft. But the way that UAT works is not only is it transmitting its signals, figuring that there's somebody on the ground that's going to be receiving it, it is also transmitting it where larger aircraft, who are most likely flying at higher altitude, are also not only going to receive that, but they're going to rebroadcast it. And so, for example, if anyone's here like from Ulster County, where there's like gliders and stuff like that, they have their own special little identifiers, which is not part of this presentation, but what you're starting to see is that they're using their UAT transponders, and because there's other aircraft that are transiting the area, you'll see them reflecting their signals back off. And so a lot of people say, oh, UAT is not that popular. It depends on when and where. And so I think that's actually kind of neat because it allows you to receive aircraft that you normally wouldn't, thanks to other aircraft in the area. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense about what UAT is. And then also like experimental aircraft like seaplanes and gliders and stuff like that. So, you know, you might be surprised that even just in the past couple of years, I've seen this take off quite extensively. There's a lot of cooler things showing up on my different aircraft trackers that I have at home. So hopefully this makes a little bit more sense. You know, airplanes, gliders, helicopters, talking commercial, civilian, military, all that good stuff. So how high does a ground station need to be? Well, as long as your ground station can see an aircraft, that's how high it needs to be. So then at that point, you just have to tell yourself, well, what's the range? And so this spiffy little graphic I created a couple of years ago, it's basically just building out to say, if you're at ground level, sea level, 10 feet, 20, 40, 60, et cetera, feet above ground level, what's your expected receive range? And then so I plotted it for 2 different altitudes. Most people, you're gonna see diminishing returns. Once you go over like 40, 50, 60 feet, how much more range are you going to get? At that point, then you have to start going up really high. Now, unless you live on a mountain or something, you're never going to really get the max. But imagine if you're an aircraft, if you're even at just 3,200 feet, they're broadcasting on ADS-B, they're going to be received for over 200 miles. That's actually kind of neat. But again, as a ground station, you know, higher is always better, but it depends on what your goal is. If you live near an airport and you just care about stuff, you know, within 40, 50 miles of you, that's fine. Not everyone cares about, like where I live, I don't really care about seeing every aircraft that flies into JFK or LaGuardia. I just care about what's in like the next 20 or 30 miles from me. And so I'll actually decrease the receive sensitivity on some of my systems because I don't necessarily on everything want to see everything far away. So hopefully that gives a little bit of clarity. And then how do you do this? Software. So there's a bunch of different things that you could do here. Probably the most widely known, I think, is FlightAware. You can go to FlightAware website. They give you instructions for how to build a ground station. You get a Raspberry Pi, you get an SDR, they give you an image, you load it on an SD card, blah, 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 blah. They give you all the instructions, and now you can feed your output of your SDR with the right antenna to their network, and then you can see all the aircraft. And then you have all these other ones like Flight Radar 24 and ADS-B Exchange, et cetera. So you can feed into their systems, but there's a couple issues with that. When you have a receiver that you create and you send into these systems, other people that are taking advantage of that, there's a catch. The catch is companies like FlightAware can be contacted and paid a couple extra bucks for aircraft owners like, I don't know, Elon Musk, he's been in the news with this, probably some of you have seen that. You could ask companies like FlightAware to say, hey, I want you to not track my aircraft. And they say, okay, sure. give us some money and we'll block that. So how do you know? If every one of these public sites, like for example, say if you hear some really loud airplane flying overhead and you say, oh good, I'm gonna go look at my FlightAware dashboard, your receiver might actually be seeing that data, but unless you're not looking at it a particular way, if you're relying upon the website itself to give you the data visualization, you might not even see that aircraft, even though it is transmitting Adsb. So I think that's something really important to point out. All 5 of these that I list are all different. Most people who really feel like they need to be private reach out to like anyone who has one of these kind of sites, or like the guy that kind of got in a tiff with Mr. Musk there. You get into some weird legal actions or whatever, but there's a way around that. We all love that. So what if you make your own ground station? So there's software available that you can have all the data visualization that you need. So I like something called Virtual Radar Server. The only unfortunate thing, it is a Windows-only application. It's getting a little long in the tooth. Yeah, there's some ways that you can do some Linux stuff on it, but it's not as good. But then there's other ways like SDR Angel is probably my favorite software. So basically, not only can you create your own ground station, you could also log all that detail. So if I told you in the last 5 years, I have a MySQL database that has every aircraft that's ever flown within the range of my receivers, and if I wanted to say, when's the last time that I saw Air Force One make a transit to Poland, which is one of its common destinations for when whoever decides to fly to Europe to do stuff. I can tell you that. Air Force Two, I can reference everything. Is it call sign AF1, AF2 versus its tail number versus a serial number? I could tell you this specific aircraft that flies which flight for JetBlue on flight 1514 or whatever. How many times have they swapped one aircraft out, or versus how many times did that same exact aircraft fly the same exact route? How often did I see that receiver? Was that flight running behind, or was it running ahead of schedule? I don't have the time to crunch all the data that I have, but I have the data, and I've actually set up like fancy little alerts where I get like some VIP things that I set alerts for. So you can do some cool stuff with that within Virtual Radar Server. Adsb Flight Tracker is something really cool where you could open up a port in something like VRS, Virtual Radar Server, and then you have an augmented reality view. So you can actually see it's translating the aircraft in real time on your phone, and then you can see them flying around on your phone. So like it's almost like a video game. So that's pretty cool. And then like SDR Angel, you can do some really advanced stuff. I have some videos on YouTube. I'm kind of like the SDR Angel fanboy, I think, on YouTube these days. But I have some videos that I've done like from Denver Airport where I was tracking aircraft as they were on the taxiway and then taking off, and you can see all this real time and do cool data viz stuff. So these are something that you can do. You can do it at home if you wanted to create like a ground station with like an antenna in your attic or roof or something, or if you just like want to load this up like on an Android tablet, just see what's out there, you can do that. So SDR Angel software is really, really useful for Adsb as well as the TISB and the UAT stuff. So you can do all that kind of fancy receiving stuff. And that's all I'm going to get into on the Adsb time, and we're right on time. Any questions on this in the front?
When you're looking at Adsb data, flight data, can you also see military and government flights or just civilian?
Yes, you can see everything. Everything that transmits. Now, here's the fun thing with military aircraft. Not all of them transmit their latitude and longitude all the time. They can turn that on and off, and that's really like an OPSEC type of thing for them to do that. But if you have multiple receivers, there's ways that you can triangulate them. And so even if I know like there's a particular C-135 flying somewhere within 50 miles-ish of me, since I have multiple receivers, I can do some fancy math with computers, and it'll actually tell me their location with an approximation. So the answer is yes, and the answer is like yes with an asterisk on it. Yes. Anything else?